Chapter 8 of The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. Today we want to discuss in particular the concept of culture and morals within a company or values. Christensen talks about those more intangible processes that he thinks are the main reason why it's so difficult for established companies to react to disruptive innovation. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's December 1st, 2020. This is Krim Delko for the day, or since the last update, actually, since last Friday. The fund is up around about 2.8%. The market's up 70 basis points. For the year, we're up 318%. The market's up 13%. We're outperforming by 305%. If you put $100 into Orange Capital Partners on January 1st, 2020, you would have $418. And if you did $100 with the S&P 500, you would have $113. This is roughly what this outperformance actually means in dollars. So Christensen talks about, in chapter 8, he talks about the culture of a company, in particular values, processes, resources. So in the end, the company is a bunch of people and they get stuff done. And they get things done by having resources, by having values, and by having processes. These are the three fundamental things. And I want to focus today on the value side of things. And values are probably the least tangible things, but the most important thing, because values are really the way people act in certain situations. You can also argue from the beginning of infinity, David Deutsch's argument that morals are really about what to do next. So the moral of a company is the value system of a company, and the value system of a company, in a nutshell, is the answer to the question, what next? Now, the question of what next can be answered already in a predetermined process, and that's what Christensen calls a process. So, for example, when a customer comes to the register and buys a coffee, the attendant at the register cashes in the coffee, puts the money in the register, gives the person a receipt and the coffee. This is predetermined. The person doesn't have to think, should I do this or that? So therefore, processes that are in place, in particular things like manufacturing and sales and all these kinds of things, they are pretty well determined. And you can argue that a well-run company, a good company, a valuable company has processes that are such that you don't have to guess every time something happens what's going to happen. You can just simply assume that X, Y, and Z is going to happen because the processes are in place. Now, Christensen talks in particular about values that are related to situations where you cannot predict what's going to happen. And this is in particular what's happening with disruptive innovation. And I want to draw the line to my personal experience and also bring a few examples in real time. In particular, for example, I often go around, talk to people either at conferences, on conference calls, in meetings with management, and it's very interesting. I talk to incumbents, let's say car industry incumbents, and they pretend that there is a competition out there for cars and electric cars, but they somehow act as if there wasn't Tesla in the market. So it's like there is this 800-pound gorilla and you're just not reacting to it. Interestingly enough, for example, QuantumScape went public last week, and I discussed this in my podcast at length, how I'm flabbergasted by the fact that in their presentation slides, they talk about a lot of good things. No question. I mean, a lot of good things are being talked about: bringing down the cost of batteries, increasing range, increasing longevity, increasing energy density by increasing weight per watt hour. All these things are super important and they open up new markets. But they're not mentioning the fact that Tesla at Battery Day has actually attacked a lot of these problems. So they pretend that there is this 800-pound gorilla, but it doesn't exist. And it's just flabbergasting. I can attest to several meetings that I had. Let's say I've met about 2 years ago a German executive who is very high up in the ranks of suppliers to the German car industry. And same thing, they spoke about the electric car market like as if Tesla didn't exist, as if the pace and innovation were determined by Volkswagen, BMW, and Daimler. I spoke with utility executives about battery storage, and they spoke to me about a hypothetical potential battery that could achieve certain cost metrics, while at the same time there was a battery in the market that already had those cost metrics, and that battery was the Tesla battery, but they pretended that those batteries don't exist. So I want to tie this together with the concept of value that Christensen often talks about. And the value system in a company, in a traditional company, is such that it gets molded. So people join a company and they get kind of molded, or I hate the word the program, but it kind of feels like they get programmed to do certain things, and then they do what others are doing, they do what the predecessors were doing, and it just starts becoming this culture in the company, and there's a lack of change, there's a lack of a willingness to do new things, and most importantly, there is this almost fear, or maybe fear is the wrong word, neglection of potential threats from the outside, potential dynamic threats that really can change the game. And I think this is a much deeper problem than most companies or most people accept. I can attest to that even now. Let's say when we look at COVID and the situation around COVID, I am flabbergasted by how people around me still think that life is normal like it used to be, when in fact it's not. For example, our kids are not going to school. My son is not playing sports. He has no competition. He has almost no friends at this point. It is terrible what's going on with the kids, but people are pretending that that's not happening. And I feel like it's because it's the same. We were disrupted, and we just don't have this ability to immediately assess the new situation and adapt. Some people have it, some don't. And I think that is the fundamental crux to the problem. If you are a company, and Christensen wrote this book 30 years ago, so he didn't have answers to how to deal with this. His answers, of course, were discussed in chapter 5, 6, and 7. Adjust a new organization with the right size, bring in a process of learning into the system so people can learn and adjust to the new technology, build an innovation stack. He's not using that word, but Jim McKelvey is using that word, and it's clearly a useful word in this context. And I want to now continue with the innovation stack argument and say that you need to have a value system which grows with the innovation stack, and therefore builds this culture of solving problems, creating new problems, solving problems. You have to start from scratch. You cannot impose it on an organization. And this is, I think, exactly, for example, what's going on with Volkswagen. Herbert Diess is openly discussing this, even in a letter that came out this week, where he is pointing out that he is desperately trying to bring in a software culture into Volkswagen, and he's not able to do. And what he's really saying, in Clayton Christensen's word, or to use the Clayton Christensen framework, what he's saying is, I don't have the value system that is necessary to implement a software driven organization. For example, software driven organizations, they need to have a certain standardization, and they need to have a certain flexibility on top of the standardization. They have to have this concept of I'm thinking out loud now. There is this concept in Silicon Valley of having sort of an X, which means a point where everything comes together, where everything is standardized. So, for example, the internet has this X shape, where the platform, the internet, is very standardized. The protocols are very standardized, and then on up, meaning upstream, which would be sort of what's on top of the internet, the applications and all these things, they're open and infinite. And also below, on the I shouldn't use the word up and downstream, because that has different implications in business lingo. So let's use above applications, and below the hardware and software under the internet infrastructure. Again, very open, all kinds of different server architectures, computer architectures, chip architectures. But the one thing, the X, that little thread where the needle goes through, that thing is very standardized. So you need something like that in a software culture, no matter what you do. And I think in a car, it's actually very well organized. This explained by Herbert Diess. You need to have a very open architecture in terms of components being delivered to the OEM, but then you need to have an operating software which ties these things all together. So that is sort of the thread where the needle goes through, and then you have to have, again, this openness for applications on top of that operating software to supply the car with new applications, software updates, etc. So the software as a service model that Herbert Diess is talking about, although he's not using the word, is being implemented by Tesla. I hope, and we're very focused at Orange Capital Partners at monitoring exactly that particular part of the Tesla business stack, which is this software as a service architecture, which has been implemented by Tesla, but now hopefully also can be developed further into more value for the customer. It's already very good. I'm not complaining by no means. As a customer myself, I'm very happy with the software side of things, but there could be a lot more. I could have more, let's say, a third-party app store that allows me to download apps for my Tesla or for usage within the context of Tesla. Those are things that I think would be very powerful. So a little bit like the Apple iPhone iOS model. So to summarize, this episode is about Chapter 8, the beginning of the discussion of Chapter 8. Chapter 8 of the Innovator's Dilemma discusses the three things that a company has, which is resources, processes, and values. We will discuss the other ones, but the most intangible one and the most flexible one, the most important one when it comes to the reaction to disruptive innovation is the value system. And we believe that incumbent companies have this lack of adaptability of the value system, which is the main reason why it is so difficult for them to react to disruptive innovation. On the other hand, companies that have a culture of changing the value system, adapting the value system through the innovation stack, with the innovation stack, and grow with the innovation stack, those companies, in our view, have the best chances of success, and Tesla is certainly one of them. Thank you.